Adult and Juvenile Detention Facility, which will appear on the ballot November 5th. You can participate in this hearing with any questions or comments you may have by calling 728-0093. And now from City Hall, the Breakfast Club's Beeman McPhee along with Peter Christian on ENT 930 KLCY.
Thank you very much, and welcome everyone at home listening on KLCY. Also want to welcome the folks watching on MCAT. Now, you're going to hear us say phone numbers a lot. Those of you watching on MCAT, please don't call because it's tape delay. This meeting is already over with. But those of you listening at home on KLCY, we invite you to participate in this meeting as we talk about the proposed adult and juvenile detention facility, or as I like to call it, the new jail. As you just heard, it is going to be on the ballot. And tonight, we want you to be as informed as possible to make a decision, whether for or against. We want you to make a very informed decision. We have lots of folks up here that are going to talk tonight. They will be brief, and then we open up the floor to all of you here in the City Council chambers, as well as all of you listening at home, to ask any questions you'd like. Find out as much as you can, or make comments, whether you have want to make comments for support, for or against. My sound man is now changing my microphone for me here. So, with that, I'll give you these phone numbers one more time. It is 728-0093. 728-0093. A lot of you listening out of town, it's 1-800-775-6432, and that's toll-free from anywhere in the state of Montana. Up first, I'd like to introduce to you our mayor. Mayor Cadis is going to give us some comments about tonight, and then County Commissioner Barbara Evans will talk to us about the jail as well. Unfortunately, they have other commitments, and we'll have to leave shortly thereafter. So, Mayor Cadis.
Thanks, Stephen. I want to offer the strongest support that I can for the jail bond. It is an absolutely important and critical part of our community infrastructure. I want to thank Sheriff Chase and Captain O'Hara and the people on the Site Selections Committee who've done, I think, an excellent job in trying to go through the whole process of getting the community the best deal that we can. The most fundamental thing that comes to my mind when we talk about the jail and we talk about the situation that we have today is that with an overflowing jail and without the ability to put people into jail who commit new crimes, we lose the ability on the streets. Our police officers do not have the force of deterrence behind them because people who are committing crimes know that there are no consequences. Unless it's just the grossest of crimes, there are no consequences without space in the jail. People know that they're not going to do any time at all for a wide variety of crimes. Without that knowledge, without that deterrence, then our police officers are handicapped. They cannot effectively enforce the law. We need to be able to have that ability to have a safe community. It's critical to us. It's critical to our community. Commissioner Evans?
Thank you, Mike. I also strongly support the jail, and I hope the folks who are voting will do the same. We've been working on getting us a new jail for 10 to 15 years, so we've known for a long time we need it. We have been sued numerous times. The courts have been very kind and not found us guilty, but one of these days we're not going to be that lucky. And when we lose a lawsuit, we will still build the jail. We will pay the inmate that sues us, and we will pay the attorney that acts as his agent. So if we build the jail, even though it's expensive, it will help save us money in the long run. It also will provide for our safety. It is not good, the kind of people we have out on the street. We have people out who have threatened to cut people's throats. We have them out that have done domestic and child abuse. As the mayor said, there is no deterrence. They know that what are you going to do, put me in jail? Well, we aren't able to put them in jail. We desperately need this bond issue to pass, and I want to encourage all of you, please turn your ballot over, because as I understand it, it's on the back of the ballot. Please don't miss it. Please vote for it. We have over 7,000 warrants that are not being served because we have no place to serve them. We have people who are reserving their time in jail clear up into May. And Often when they come, we send them away because there's still no place to put them. For your safety, for everyone's safety, we ask you to please support this bond issue.
Thank you, Commissioner Evans. As you can tell, we've got a lot of folks representing all different aspects of our community here tonight that will be talking on behalf of this project. I remind you, if you just joined us, now that you know, even though it's the second inning, the baseball game is a blowout. I understand that the Braves are already ahead 6-0. But for those of you listening at home, if you just joined us, by all means, write these phone numbers down, 728-0093 or 1-800-775-6432. We will open this up for your questions shortly. Now I'd like to turn it over to our sheriff, Sheriff Doug Chase. Let him chat a bit about the need for this proposed jail.
Thank you, Beeman. We appreciate the opportunity to be on KLCY and also MCAT tonight to discuss what we think is one of the most important safety issues within the community. It's a safety issue for the citizens, it's a safety issue for the detention officers who must work in a facility that is, without a doubt, grown out of its age. It's 30 years old. Average life expectancy in most jails is 25 years, so it served its purpose well. However, the Missoula population has nearly doubled, if it has not doubled, since the time when it was built. We are finding a need now to have to release prisoners that are charged with serious crimes in order to put other prisoners in that we feel are more of a safety factor to the community. Detention officers, street officers, county attorney, judges are having to help us make these decisions. It's not comfortable. The whole criminal justice system for the last 19 months has been unbelievable. Something in my 30 years of service in Missoula law enforcement that I've never experienced. There was never a time when I was on the streets that I wasn't able to put somebody in jail. And until the past 19 months, I wouldn't have believed that there'd come a time when it became a daily practice when we couldn't incarcerate people. So I would ask people to gather the information. Be sure to call us at the Sheriff's Department if you have questions so we can address those issues that you may have. We'll do the best we can to get you the information that you desire. And we ask that you be sure on Election Day to go forth and vote. And it is on the backside of page 2, the last issue, known as the Missoula County Bond Election Issue.
Thank you, Sheriff Chase. I want to remind you watching at home on MCAT that this is tape delayed, so please don't call our phone numbers. However, those of you listening at home, if you'd like to watch this, it will be rebroadcast on Cablecast MCAT channel on TCI Channel 7, Fibervision 13, October 27th, 2 p.m. So you can watch this. Those of you listening at home, if you'd like to watch this, more than happy to. I'd like to bring up a representative from our city police tonight. He is Captain Albert. And Captain Albert can certainly address from the city standpoint why we need this project to pass.
Thank you. Well, I hate to keep saying the same things over and over that everybody else has said, but I guess they're just facts of life. There's some serious issues here at work, and this is something that has to be addressed now. It cannot be put off till later. First of all, I think we have a duty to act as a police department. The people expect us to act in certain ways and to make the criminal justice system work. For that to happen, as Sheriff Chase had said, we have to have some consequences for people's actions. These are not good people like you and I who have a good conscience or good moral character. These are people who the threat does not deter them from committing crimes. And therefore there has to be a punishment, and there has to be a method of keeping other people safe. But really the key issue here is safety. It's safety of the officers and safety of the public. You have to keep in mind that as a public, you're asking the officers to go out and risk their lives dealing with these people on a daily basis, and there has to be some ability for them to do their job. We handled 4,400 calls just last month. Of those 4,400 calls, you have to understand that many of whatsoever, and jail is the only place that they should be, yet we do not have the ability to put them there. And safety, and also on the safety issue, is the safety of the public, yourselves, your families. It used to be that you probably had heard about a victim of a crime, or you knew of somebody maybe who had been a victim. You're probably now finding people who you know are victims of crimes, or you yourselves are, or you know very first-hand knowledge of crime. That's because the criminal element has no deterrence, and therefore they can act with impunity.
Thank you, Captain. I appreciate that. Well, we're going to continue our discussion on here as we go along. We'll be taking a break here shortly. And while you're listening, be sure and write down your questions, because I don't want you to forget any of these. It's very important that we get all our questions answered. Now, from the judicial side of things, and I know that both these gentlemen have had a lot of frustration due to this overcrowding, and I'd like to bring up first Judge John Odlin up to speak about this. Judge?
Thank you, Beeman. This jail issue is, I think, probably, as Captain or Sheriff Chase said, probably one of the most important issues that's come around in a long time. As a street officer, when I was on the highway patrol before I got to be a judge, it was what we called, it was a big joke. It was catch and release. You caught people, you turned them loose, because you didn't have a jail to put them in, and that was 10 years ago. And now it's got to the point where I'm on the other side of the bench now, and it's really frustrating because there's people that need to go to jail, and there's no room in the jail. There's no room in the inn. We're giving reservations now. I think it's up into June, trying to get people into jail that are dictated by law to have to go to jail. 24 hours mandatory for first offense DUIs, 48 hours for driving while revoked, and then assaults and part family member assaults and those types of things that we should be putting people in jail for, but we can't do that. We need this facility. So we're putting a terrible pressure on the jail staff and on all of us in the judicial system, because as they said, we get calls at night and all different times. We have someone worse than the people that we have in jail now, and we need to release someone. So we have to make a decision on who to turn loose. We didn't think that person needed to be there in the first place. We just don't put people in jail just for the fun of it. We have need to have them there. And then we put them there, and then we have to turn them loose. I don't know what kind of a message that's sending, but I know that the street officers and everyone else is getting very frustrated with the fact that there is no jail. There is no place to put these people. I have people come in front of me on a weekly basis, daily basis, that haven't paid their fines. They haven't done their community service. They haven't done their ACT program, which is a program that they have to do for driving while intoxicated. They haven't done the MANS program, which is an anger management program. They come before me and I ask them why they haven't done it. Don't have to do it. What do you mean you don't have to do it? What are you going to do? Put me in jail? You don't have any room in the jail. So then I just have to kind of back down and say, well, okay. And it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating to all of us. And we need desperately to have this jail. And I used a term a long time ago when we first started talking about this jail that law enforcement, the judicial system, the attorneys need a big stick. And that's our big stick. That's our deterrent. We don't have, the fines don't seem to work. We put them into programs. We can put them into all kinds of programs. But if we don't have something backing us up that we can do, a deterrent, then our programs are no good. We've started a work program now for the county where that people can work for 8 hours and get credit for 24 hours in jail. But if those people don't do those programs, what are we going to do with them? I come back to Captain O'Hara or come back to Lieutenant Hopper and say, geez, I've got somebody that needs to go to jail. And they laugh at me. What year do you want to get them in? So we desperately need this. We desperately need to get this vote, and we desperately need this new jail. There's no other way to put it. Community safety-wise, I think people would be really nervous about the people that are out walking on the streets that should actually be in jail. People putting knives to people's throats. be issued a citation just like a traffic citation and put back on the street. Burglars caught in people's houses, issued citations and put back on the street. Car thieves coming from Washington. Catch the car thieves, no place to put them in jail, write them a citation, put them back on the street. That's the type of things that are going on, folks, and it's going on every day. We need this jail. Please help us.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd also like to bring up Judge Larson, who was nice enough to come by this evening and talk with us about this situation. Once again, I do encourage you to write down your thoughts and questions because we will be taking phone calls shortly here. Judge Larson.
Thanks, Beeman. In the district court, we always have the more serious crimes. They sometimes start with Judge Odlin, and Judge Odlin makes an initial determination as to whether or not they should be held. Oftentimes, though, they come to us and more motions for release are made. It's a tough call now because there are, as Judge Odlin has said, no places in the jail. We have to release people every day. The county attorney's office, I know, carefully goes over the list with the sheriff. They make recommendations to the court. We have been very lucky so far that the folks that have been released prior to trial have not committed more serious crimes. It's just a time bomb that's ticking. We're very fortunate, I think, to have the planning effort that's gone into this jail by Sheriff Chase and Captain O'Hara and the group of people that they've put together. It's a very comprehensive facility. One of the causes of the logjam, of course, is at the state level as well, and the state prison is full. And many of our prisoners that we sentence in district court no longer go to prison. They end up in the Missoula County Jail for an extended period of time, and that is another cause of our logjam. And the new facility, of course, will have a regional prison component that will assist us in opening up more spaces for county folks who need to be held accountable by Judge Odlin and by the district courts. We do have that extra option, theoretically, to state prison, but it's largely theoretical now because of the overload at the state prison. Another aspect that I want to mention is the juvenile wing that is attached to this facility. We don't have a place, or we didn't have a place in Missoula until just recently to hold juveniles. The jail did have a 24-hour capability when there was room, but that room is gone, so juveniles couldn't be held in the jail. We recently remodeled the old federal marshal's holding cell, and we have a place for 2 kids for 96 hours, which is 3 days in a weekend. But otherwise, our juveniles are transported 120 miles up the road to Kalispell, and we have officers who transport those kids back and forth to Kalispell. That's, it's no secret that Highway 93 is the most dangerous road in the state, and that again is another time bomb. Those kids, and some of those kids, some of those drivers, some of those detention officers risk their lives every day going up and down fair weather and foul. We spend an incredible amount of money transporting those kids up and to and from Kalispell that could be used on other programs to help turn these kids around earlier. And of course, if we had the club in the juvenile justice system, and that's been the problem in the juvenile justice system for several years, there hasn't been a club there. And that has led to many of the people that we now see as adults in the criminal system. They didn't, as juveniles, have the option of detention available, and now they see our county jail not available as well. And so it's a joke all the way through. It's very disconcerting, but with this new facility, I'm very optimistic that the criminal justice system in this county will have a lot more clout, a lot more effectiveness, and be a lot safer community than it currently is.
Thank you, Judge Larson. Now I'd like to turn it over to our city attorney, Jim Nugent. Is Jim here, Jim? Jim's going to talk a little bit about some of the other legal issues surrounding this. And also do want to remind you, those of you who would like to watch this, it will be rebroadcast on the 27th on MCAT.
Thank you. What I want to share with you tonight was some of the concerns of the city attorney's office staff with respect to the issue of the overcrowded and full jail. And this is an issue that comes up frequently, often on a daily basis, usually also at our weekly staff meetings. And some of the initial concerns are safety, public safety, safety for the victims of partner abuse, domestic abuse, safety of the citizens out there with respect to drunk drivers. It's happened on more than one occasion that officers, if there's only one cell available, if they're lucky enough to have one cell available and they have more than one partner abuse or domestic abuse case, have to decide between which of the offenders seems to have made the least threatening accusations towards the victim or victims that are involved. And of course, it's always a concern that during the high-pitched emotion of the evening, that the victim is in great danger if the individual is released. And pursuant to state law, the state legislature has instructed law enforcement that they're to take these people into custody and hold them in custody until a judge has time to see them. Another concern, of course, is the drunk drivers and the time that's consumed with trying to watch or babysit them while we try and find someone who can take them home, because the city police don't give free rides home with respect to drunk drivers, and we don't want to release them back on the road. And even if we think we have their keys, often people might have another set of keys somewhere in their possession, and that's a danger for every citizen out there on the roads in the city, or if they leave the city out on the highways and county roads. I know personally I've had more than one friend here in the city of Missoula killed by a drunk driver within the city limits of the city of Missoula. I think that some of the other things that we have to be concerned about are the potential civil liability in these potential situations. I always felt that claimants or plaintiffs' attorneys are only limited by their ingenuity as to the theories that they'll come up with, but failure to protect is a pretty common theory that can be used, especially on behalf of a victim, if the victim, for example, ends up being a homicide victim after the police or sheriff have been to the house but not been able to put the person into custody. Similar concerns with respect to the drunk drivers. Also concerns about releases from jail when we do have individuals who are bumped out or nudged out because they need to make room for more serious offenders, and whether that person might go back to a victim somewhere along the way in their past history, and there's no opportunity for advance warning. We often don't get any advance warning ourselves if people have to be released. It's usually a quick judgment call or a contact with the judge and the person's released so that someone else more serious can get in there. As has been indicated, it's awful expensive to be taking these prisoners to Superior, to Hamilton, Butte. I know some of the prisoners go to Butte, and the minors go up to Kalispell. You have not only the time of the officers, staff, but also the fuel and the wear and tear on the cars as well. And there's also the concerns that even with the weekend court process that the United States Supreme Court requires the judicial review of warrantless arrest, we can't keep openings in the jail, and sometimes we'll come down for weekend court and have to wait for prisoners to arrive from places like Superior before they can be arraigned. So it's costing the community lots of money already, and easily probably in the tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands of dollars annually. But I think our biggest concern is the public safety issues with respect to victims of partner abuse, domestic abuse, as well as victims of drunk drivers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. We're going to take a little break here, and when we come back, we will hear from the man who is, well, maybe responsible for all this, our county attorney, Dusty Jashaw, who has one of the highest conviction rates anywhere, and he's going to address some of the concerns. I do encourage you to write your questions down. We will be opening this up for questions very shortly, as well as Captain O'Hara is going to show you the jail plans. A lot of you have not had a chance to see that. Those of you listening at home on the radio, you may have a little difficult time, but Captain O'Hara will do his best to explain what all those look like. So stick around. We'll be right back after this short break on KLCY.
Thanks to Seattle's...
Welcome back to the City Council chambers here at City Hall. I'm Beatman McPhee, your host today, as we discuss the proposed jail, the new Adult and Juvenile Detention Center, which you're going to have a chance to vote on coming up in November. I do encourage you to look for this on the ballot. Unfortunately, it doesn't say jail bond issue on there. It says Missoula County bond election. As you read it, though, you'll realize it's on the last of the second page of your ballot. So when you are voting, I really encourage you to look for this and then cast your vote either way. And hopefully tonight, from our speakers and the questions from our audience, you are going to have a more informed decision. Now, County Attorney Dusty Deshaw is going to come up and talk about some of the frustrations that his office has experienced.
Thank you very much. You know, somebody said this is one of the most important things that's come along in quite a while. Frankly, folks, I think it is the most important thing that's happened in Missoula County for many, many years. And the reason I think that is because I believe this is truly a basic quality of life issue for those of us that live here. You know, we've done a lot, all of us, to try to make Missoula a wonderful place to live. We spend a lot of money on a lot of things. We've got great schools, we've got great parks, we've got wonderful infrastructure and all sorts of things. But I'm telling you, if we don't have this jail, a lot of that is going to be for naught. Earlier in the presentation, I heard Barbara Evans mention that there were 7,000 warrants out for people. Well, it's worse than that. In June, we had about 6,500 warrants. In late August, we had about 7,500. The other day, Mike O'Hara told me we had 9,300. That's an incredible backlog of warrants that are filling up at just a breakneck rate. Now, Judge Odlin talked about those people that appear in front of him that flaunt the law, that flaunt him, that don't do the things they're required to do. Well, I'm talking about 9,300 people that aren't even that good. They don't even bother to appear at all. And most of those people are simply not abiding by the basic everyday rules of society that we all expect. And I can't help but think of the city of New York. How many of us would like to live in New York? Not many. It's a pest hole in many respects. Yet, in recent times, the city administration in New York has changed that around quite a bit by simply enforcing the law and putting people in the jail when they need to be in jail. The crime rate in the city of New York has declined by something like 20% in the last couple of years just because there's been basic, everyday law enforcement. Right now, we don't have that ability in Missoula County. It's getting worse and worse, and we will be just as bad as the city of New York or worse in no time at all if we don't get this facility. I can't imagine what it'll be like here if this bond issue doesn't pass. I just simply can't imagine it. It's getting to the point where it's almost unbearable right now, and I don't know that I'd even want to live here if we don't get this. It's like I said, a basic, everyday quality of life issue that's the most important thing that folks in Missoula County have had to contend with for many, many years, in my opinion. So please, like Judge Arlen just said, please help us. We got to have it. You've got to have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dusty. Now we'll bring up some representatives from the state of Montana. Joining us first is Mr. Bob Anderson. Those of you listening at home, I do encourage you, once again, as we have Bob come up here, remember to vote. It's one thing I want to remind you a lot of. Please vote. Whether you vote yes or no, your vote needs to count. Bob?
Thank you, Damon. I'll be very short. As you heard from all the local officials, you have a major problem here as far as providing some law enforcement services in the area of jail space. As you all know, the state also has the same problem at the state level. As you all are probably aware, we have major overcrowding problem, which is filtered down and is impacting counties because we can't accept any more admissions to the prison. Again, the county jails have to hold those inmates, which create, again, more problems for the county. So because of this problem, we approached the last legislative session and said, why doesn't the state and the counties get together and come up with an approach where we can join resources and funds and try to resolve this problem together? And so we developed some laws and asked for some funding, and the legislature adopted that. And now we have some legal authority to negotiate with counties to assist them in developing jails with state prison beds, and also let the counties operate those facilities and the state pay the county the needed per diem to operate facilities. Well, we have, as you know, we have one in Great Falls which is under construction. We are currently at the end of planning one in Glendive, which will be under construction in early spring. And so we are totally in support of the Missoula jail issue. The governor is in total support of the project. We've already committed to Missoula approximately $100,000 to help them in their planning and design of the facility, which you'll see shortly. So that we've already committed some money even before the bond election has been held. So the state is really in need of it also. So we're asking your support, and on behalf of Governor Roscoe and the Department of Corrections, encourage you to vote for this important bond issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I know we have some callers holding on the line, and we're going to get to you just as soon as we can, as well as I'm sure we have questions from our audience here at City Hall. But those of you listening to KLCY at home, we'll get to your questions shortly, but I do want everyone to have a chance to talk. What happens a lot of time, once we get everyone to talk, your question a lot of times gets answered right there. Now I'd like to also bring up from the state of Montana, Sam Lamayich. Actually, he said his name right. So, Sam?
Thank you. I think it's important to have the people on the phones get their chance here, so I'm going to keep this real brief. I work for the state. Unlike Bob, I do live here in Missoula, though, so I have a real interest in community safety and protection, both from the state standpoint and the fact that I'm a resident here. Just briefly, we currently have 140 inmates across the state that are waiting to be delivered to Montana State Prison, to a prison that is currently holding about 1,300 inmates and was built for 850. I see the opportunity here for the county and the state to really get together on a joint venture that's going to benefit both of us. I think Bob touched on that. Just for the public's awareness and knowledge, there's currently 700 people on probation and parole here in Missoula County. My probation and parole officers need jail space to accommodate these people when they don't follow the rules and conditions of their probation as laid down by Judge Larson. I just too briefly want to talk a little bit about the juvenile detention part of this plan. I think that's real critical. My office now is currently supervising juvenile aftercare cases, youth that are coming out of Pine Hills in the Montana Youth Alternatives Program. We're seeing some real problems with youth becoming more violent, more aggressive. We need detention facilities for those people to at least hold them while we can look for some other alternatives for them in the community. With that, I'll say thank you, and the state endorses this project 100%. I encourage everyone to vote for it, and I think we need to hear from the public now.
Thank you very much, Sam. Before we get to your calls at home, by the way, if you'd like, you can call 728-0093 or 1-800-775-6432 and get in line, as we will open up the questions here shortly. But I would like to have someone come up now and talk about the site selection process. This has got a lot of attention recently. A lot of you, unfortunately, did not come to our site selection hearings that we had, but I know many of you have questions about this, and Paul DeWolf is going to be able to answer those. He is of Gordon Krill and Drapes, is it? And maybe Paul can come up here and address how they came to this site, why it was picked, and jot your questions down if you have more after Paul talks. I'll help you, Paul, if you need some help.
Thank you, Damon. My role in this process is as a member of the design team. I'm a structural engineer and have helped with the development of a process to select a site for the new detention center. The key to a successful site selection really is to get as much public input as possible, to understand all of the requirements for a site. There are requirements that, of course, Captain O'Hara has because he's got to detain these people. There are requirements that the judges will have because they've got to be able to get these people into their courtrooms and out again. There are requirements that we, the citizens, I am a citizen of the city of Missoula, we have expectations for what this facility should look like and where it should be. So we brought together a committee of citizens, county and city employees, and of some of the design professionals, myself included. discussing what we thought was mandatory in the site selection process, we thought, first of all, we had to understand what all the criteria were for selecting a site. What are all the factors that determine where you put a major facility like this? Second step in the process is to identify all the available sites. Just where within the county could we build it? What requirements are there for it to be adjacent to or not adjacent to other facilities or areas within the city or county? And to take all of those available sites and in some rational way rate them according to the selection criteria that we put together. And then out of that, we needed to be able to recommend a best option and some backups as we may need them. The process had to be thorough. We had to really do a good job of note-taking, of understanding all of the objections or all of the support for any given site. The process had to be open to scrutiny. The notes of all the meetings, the minutes, the documentation developed during this whole process is available, and I'm going to talk about a lot of it tonight, but it had to be open to public scrutiny, and it really needed to show a direct link, a direct cause and effect link between the needs and wants of the city, the county, and the citizens thereof. As I said earlier, we brought together a committee of citizens to define the selection criteria. There were people from a lot of different walks of life, and they included, of course, some design professionals such as myself, some members of the city and county staffs. We got a very good cross-section of input, people who could view this from an economic development standpoint, people who could view it from a business owner's standpoint. And we asked them to tell us what were the selection criteria, and we'll list all of those briefly in a minute. We asked the citizens also to identify the candidate sites. Where do we think it would be most appropriate to build a facility like this? Where could it possibly be built? And what did we know about available land? And then, of course, we asked those citizens to take all of that information, put it in their minds, and come up with an identification of what were the best candidates. Probably the hardest part of this whole process was to identify the criteria. I think we spent maybe 8 to 10 hours over a period of several days trying to identify what criteria were relevant, what were strong determinations, what were not strong. We got some input from the National Institute of Corrections. We got some input from a previous jail study that was done in 1984. I remember my dates right. And it boiled down to the list that we have on the board here. For those of you who are listening, I'll go through them one at a time. The first issue is the ability of any site to accommodate the detention facility, a potential new sheriff and police office, and other related offices. This first criteria comes out of a study commissioned by the city and county in 1994 to look at the whole collection of facilities that both bodies currently operate out of, and to tell them just what was the needs as the county and city grow, how much office space did they have, and how much more were they going to need. The answer that came back from that consultant was, before you do anything else, you have to build a new jail. You are so constrained in office space that the assumption that a new jail will be built has to be made first before you can deal with any of the other problems we have in governing effectively because of a lack of floor space to put the people. And so the jail study began with the assumption that we would look for new law enforcement offices as well as a new place to put adult and juvenile detention facilities. One of the critical needs coming out of the site, or the space evaluation study in 1994, was the obvious lack of sufficient operating space for both the sheriff's office and the police department. I think probably one of the most eye-opening experiences in that was to have the sheriff bring us into his offices on the 3rd floor and sit one person down on one end of a bench that's only about 5 feet long and sit another person down at another end of the bench and says, when we bring in a victim and a perpetrator, alleged perpetrator in a domestic abuse case, we sit the victim here and we sit the alleged perpetrator here, and they're literally within arm's reach. They have nowhere else to put them in the department. So that's the sort of needs there are secondary to the jail, driving the need to be able to build a detention facility and eventually a sheriff's office, etc. The ability to accommodate future expansion is critical. If you think about the situation we're in today, we have a jail. It's on the 4th floor of the county annex, and we can't expand because it's on the 4th floor. You can't build out when there's nothing below it. The facility has to accommodate parking. We're talking about a staff in the new facility of 75 total and 35 at any one time working in the facility. You've got to have space for them to park. You've got to be able to put a buffer zone around the facility. You've got to be able to make sure that the facility is isolated enough from the surrounding area that you have control over what goes on in that facility and around it. Acquisition cost of any land purchase had to be considered. The land had to be available within our schedule. As you can tell from all of the people that have come before me tonight, we needed this yesterday, and we can't be involved in lengthy acquisition of site. The site needs to be able to provide for a facility that guarantees the safety of the staff, the safety of the public, and the safety of the inmates. It's been quite a problem recently with assaults in the jail. We need to be able to have a facility large enough to keep people isolated from each other. Sight and sound separation from the facility's neighbors was considered an important criteria. Another very important criteria was trying to keep the trip time from either the jail to the hospital or the jail to the courts down to 10 minutes. Sites located in the remote part of the county were deemed not acceptable because of the time it would take to transport prisoners to court dates, or to the hospital in case of medical emergency. The time and cost of transportation is significant today when the jail is literally attached to the courthouse. It gets greater and greater as you go further and further away. The site has to be accessible to primary roads and to public transportation. The folks that are interned in this facility don't necessarily need that transportation, but they are allowed visitors, and visitors need to be able to get there. Quite often public transportation is their mode of transportation. It needs to be along the mountain line routes, and it needs to be accessible to primary roads for safety reasons, for fire access to the site. The site has to be big enough and of the right shape, square being good and long and narrow not being good, to allow for flexible building configurations. As we got into the design of the building, we needed to be able to have the flexibility to expand one end or contract another end and not run into the boundaries of the property. Access to utilities is very important. One of the significant cost issues in any construction project is getting to the water lines, the sewer lines, the gas lines, the electrical lines, the phone lines. Another aspect was any wetlands or other unacceptable environmental impacts, and you had to make sure that the site didn't have any of those issues. Impact on existing traffic. Traffic is a popular subject of discussion these days in Missoula. We wanted to make sure that we were keeping that in consideration as we went on. And finally, the last criteria that we tried to consider was the social impact of the site on the neighbors and the adjacent landowners, if you will.
And with that, we'll take a little break, and Paul will continue his explanation of how they came upon the site for the proposed jail. It's on Mullen Road. We'll get to exactly where as we get a little further on. But we need to take a quick break. We'll be back on KLCY Radio in about 3 minutes. And those of you that want to get in line for questions, 728-0093 or 775-6432. This public hearing of the proposed adult and juvenile detention facility continues right after this.
On 26
Welcome back to City Hall, the City Council chambers. I'm Beeman McPhee, your host, as tonight we talk about the proposed Adult and Juvenile Detention Center. And this is a public hearing. You're hearing a lot of comment from experts that helped plan and put this project together. And then we're going to listen to you and have you give comments, questions, and that. And we'll be getting to those calls shortly. If you want to call in and get in line here on KLCY 728-0093 or 1-800-775-6432. Paul DeWolf continues now talking about the site selection and how the site selection committee came to choose the site on Mullen Road. Paul?
Thank you, Beeman. Before the break, I talked maybe in too much detail about the selection criteria that we used. Now I'm going to talk about how we identified potential properties that could be used for this facility. We started with a list of all county-owned land located throughout the county, obviously. And then we asked the committee members, and as I said before, they were a cross-section of the community with connections in the real estate world, in the business community, in the economic development community, in the urban redevelopment community also, what sites privately owned they might know of that were large enough to host this facility. And then through the radio stations, this one in particular, and through the Missoulian, we sought general citizen input. We got a few inputs on sites that people thought, that just general citizens thought were appropriate for this activity. We ended up with a list of 24 total sites covering most of the Missoula Valley. We had sites as far west as the I-90 and 93 intersection out at the Y. We had sites as far east as the Bonner to Milltown area. But we had mostly a concentration of sites in the downtown area with a few county-owned pieces of property towards the south, Spurgeon Road, Fort Missoula, and that sort of area also included. The committee members that were then asked to rate all 24 sites regardless of any preconceived notion of their suitability according to the selection criteria that we developed. Having done that evaluation, and it was a sort of a mathematical scoring of all the sites, they came down to a list of 6 sites. The first of the 6 was the existing county shop site, which is at the northeast corner of Broadway and Reserve. The second was the Mullen Road site, also known as the Worth property, which is at the just west of the intersection of Mullen and Broadway. A large empty field. If you've driven Mullen Road, you've seen it. It's very apparent where it is. A third site called the Nicholson property near the intersection of I-90 and Reserve Street, just to the southeast of that intersection. The Van Evans site, which is an old plywood plant, as I understand it, was there at one time, which is just north of the city cemetery. Coal Mine Road site, which was south of the interstate and near the BFI landfill site. And then finally, White Pine and Sash was in the mix. It was erroneously reported that that site was going to become available and was quickly taken out of the consideration when we found out that they intend to stay in business. We sought public input through the Missoulian quick call system to see what general comments we could get on the sites. And the results of that were, as we show here, that Mullen Road was favored by about 31% of the people who called in. Nicholson property, again at the southeast corner of Reserve and I-90, about 30% of the people, and then the county shop site about 20%, and the other sites were much, much further down the list. We then asked the design team, the architects and engineers working on the facility, to review that list of six sites and get a little more technical evaluation of those 6 sites and determine which one the design team considered to be the best. The criteria that we used on the design team included the cost of the site, the access to utilities, any known environmental or geotechnical concerns, roadway access, the shape of the site. Again, as I said earlier, a square site is much easier to work with than a long, skinny one in terms of giving you flexibility of design. Also the grade, were there any extreme slopes or gullies in the site that would need to be filled in. Some of the more expensive parts of construction, again, are just getting the land flat enough to build on. Out of the list of 6, and going through this process, we got ourselves down to a list of 3, the Mullen Road site, the county shops, and the Nicholson property. We then went to a 3rd level of even deeper assessment by bringing in the civil engineer on our design team, a local firm by the name of WGM, and asked them to do an in-depth assessment of those 3 sites. We asked them to take a closer look at utility access, a closer look at grading, road access, and traffic impacts. There were some significant findings out of there, issues that we didn't expect to be as strong a determiner as they were. Both the county shop site and the Nicholson site were considered by the engineer to be rather small. They contained steep grades or hillsides on one side or more, which reduced the usable flat land. The Nicholson site, as it turned out, had an irrigation ditch, which still was legally active, if not in actual use, and also the Yellowstone pipeline running through it. The Mullen Road site, on the other hand, while requiring some utility infrastructure improvements to be used, turned out to be the largest and the most flexible option for the siting of the facility. The design team consultants came back to the site committee on May 16th and said, we believe the Mullen Road site to be the best site. It permits us the most economical development of a facility, even though it requires the county to acquire the land. It provides the most economical operational scenario for the facility because it keeps the detention center close to the courts, close to the hospital. The site committee then endorsed our recommendation and took it on to the Board of Commissioners and to, a set of public meetings that we held in July, am I remembering correctly? In order to get public input and a public review of the whole process. And essentially, today we're there. We believe the Mullen Road site to be the most effective siting for the detention facility. And we've turned that recommendation over, and now we have gone on to develop designs for the facility based on using that property. Steven?
All right, thank you very much, Paul. And that got us to the site selection. Now, of course, it's up to you coming up in November. Those of you listening on KLCY at home and those of you here, in November, you're going to go vote on this. But you probably want to know what it's going to look like, how it's going to be designed and all that. The project manager for this project was Captain Mike O'Hara. And Captain O'Hara is now going to take some time here and show you everything from how the site is laid out to the actual design of the jail. And we'll turn it over to Captain O'Hara and let you look at it. I hope that answered a lot of your site selection questions. If you did not get your questions answered, by all means, 728-0093 or 1-800-775-6432. Captain O'Hara?
Thank you, Beeman. Let me just do some follow-up on the site. Again, that was a 39-acre site. And through the work of our architects and engineers, we determined we needed 21 of those acres. So we're looking at the eastern edge of that site on Mullen Road. And for those on the radio, I'll describe it to you. What we've done is master planned that site. The The most eastern edge, we reserved 61,000 square feet for a future law and justice center. That's for the courts, law enforcement, highway patrol, city and county attorney. And that site is large enough to accommodate a 180,000 square foot, 3-story building. Of course, if we wanted to go higher, that would be fine. To give you an idea of what 180,000 square feet means on the radio, what that means is the courthouse annex 18 stories tall. So you can see we've planned way down the road so we don't get caught up. The facility that would be just west of that originally was going to be the juvenile detention facility. It was going to be a separate facility. When we looked at land cost, cost of building heating plants, cost at delivering services, we asked the architects and engineers, is there a way that we can blend the two buildings together to save money, to save costs of land acquisition, and also to provide services to the juveniles at a lower cost? They had to meet the criteria of sight and sound separation for juveniles. They did that, and that blending of that facility saved roughly $500,000. We were quite pleased with that turnout. So directly west of the what we call the courts building would be an expansion unit should we need one. Then would be the main facility, and then another expansion unit at the west end of the main unit. The other criteria we looked at was the Missoula Pre-Release Center, and Sue Wilkins is here in the audience today, so if anybody listening has questions about that, she'll be here to answer those questions. So the Missoula Pre-Release Center is a halfway house for transition living from the prison to street life. So we reserve space for them. And why is that good for us, the city and county taxpayers? Well, we're going to charge Sue to put a building up there, whether we sell the land to her or lease it. That'll reduce our overall cost of that site. Additionally, with the expertise that they have in the pre-release center, we'll be able to use some of their services and share costs and reduce costs. So that's a little bit more on the site. Now I'll go into the facility plan a little bit. I'll get Beeman to move the podium, if you would. Okay, again, for those at home, I'll try to explain the facility to you a little bit. It's got 3 housing units that are kind of shaped like ball fields. Since we have the series going on, you can kind of relate to that a little bit. The western wing is for the state prison. That's 144 beds, and it's colored in green. We colored it in green for one simple reason, because that means money. We'll be getting approximately $5 million from the state for the construction and approximately $2.2 million a year in operational money. Well, why is that money important? Well, if somebody gave me the entire $17 million we need to build our jail, I still couldn't operate it because I need money to hire the staff, to heat the building. So with that covers our shortfall. So we get $1.3 million right now to operate the current jail, and that's what I'm going to get when we open the new facility, with the state bearing actually the biggest cost of this. So with that, the middle unit is a county intake unit. This is where we classify inmates. There's a total of 48 beds, 32 of which are the classification unit. Well, why is classification important? Everybody's probably aware of the incident in Lake County where Mr. Sattler killed another inmate who was in for drunk driving. Well, the situation there is they couldn't classify and separate the violent from the nonviolent. That's something we can't do in Missoula either. This unit will allow us to do that so we can identify those inmates who have aggressive tendencies and put them in our maximum unit. Now, the unit to the right, or the most eastern, which is another large unit, identical in size to the state unit, has 144 beds for the county, and there's medium custody, minimum custody, and a woman's unit there. So with that, those are the 3 main housing units for adults. Now on the site plan I showed you is the juvenile housing unit. We attached that again at the eastern edge. That's outlined in purple here. Again, why is it there? Simply to save money. We can bring food service down the corridors, laundry down the corridors, medical staff down the corridors, instead of having to move them outside the building and pay those extra costs. For the officers, the convenience is they have a single drive-through garage or a vehicle sally port. The officers drive into here and they can go to one of three places. They can take the juvenile to the juvenile housing unit, they can take an adult to the booking unit, or in case of a drunk driver, they can take them right over to the DUI processing area. So for a street officer, he doesn't have to go to 3 different places. Additionally, with the Missoula Pre-Release Center, they have that facility looming over them so that if one of their offenders violates the rules, they can bring them right there. They know there's a cause and effect to their actions. Additionally, in the facility, what are these inmates going to be doing? Well, we have 3 areas for them to work in. They don't work outside the facility, they work in the facility. We have an industrial use program that's located on the western edge. We also have a laundry room adjacent to that and a large kitchen. Inmates will have to work, they'll have to clean, and they'll have to cook. We're not going to sit there and hire a bunch of staff to do all the cooking and cleaning for them. That's their job. If they don't cook, they don't clean, they don't get those services. Just as simple as that. The other areas that we'll have that we can share with the county is programming areas. Those are areas where they can get anger management, GED counseling, AA, something that we don't offer in our jail, but because of the state unit, we can share those spaces and reduce costs. With that, let me talk about one of the critical issues that we're faced right now in Missoula that happened up in Lake County, and something that, frankly, some people don't agree with, and that's outdoor exercise. Lake County was sued. They're being ordered to spend close to $700,000 to build outdoor exercise, and additionally, they'll have to lose 20 beds in their facility. Well, we made the design. We asked the architects, can we design this so we don't have to spend a lot of money in terms of designing these outdoor recreation spaces? And again, for those at home, it's going to be hard to visualize, but those on MCAT, you'll see that the areas outlined here, 3 of the 4 walls in the triangular shape are already part of the facility. A very short wall had to be constructed along with roof mesh to have this outdoor exercise area. So we kept the costs down, but it's a federal mandate. We have to comply with that. The same thing is true with the other 2, and for those on the TV, I'll point them out. Here in the middle and on the end. So again, in those cases there, 2/3 of the wall structures were already part of the building, so we didn't have to worry about that. When we went out and talked to the community surrounding the building, that's the business community, we asked them, what are your concerns? Their biggest concern was they didn't want to see a prison-type building that had razor wire, that had gun towers, that had searchlights, barking dogs. They wanted something that would actually help their business. In other words, we're going to have people coming by that facility. And so for some businesses, they need the drive-by person to attract that customer. So we said, we understand that. We went back to the architects and said, what can you do for us? Well, we have an artist rendering that I'll show you now. As you can see by this artist rendering, the one thing that's missing is you'll see right in this area here for at home, it's on the eastern edge. The juvenile wing wasn't drawn in because we hadn't made the move at the time. But if you look at this structure, it looks more like a community college. It does not look like a prison. You do not see inmates running around outside the facility because inmates are not allowed outside in this type of a facility. Well, the question is, well, you were talking about outdoor exercise. How do they get outdoors? Well, again, I'll point out to those at home and describe to the listeners the 3 areas, and you'll see that there's 3 blue sections on the roof of the structure. Those 3 areas are the meshed areas over the outdoor exercise. Well, when they say outdoor, that means straight up. They can look straight up to the sky, something they probably haven't been doing most of their lives anyway, something that they probably needed to do. So that's how they're going to get their fresh air and their sunlight. When you're driving by this facility, you won't see the inmates. Well, people ask me, well, who's going to take care of the outside lawn maintenance? Well, you've probably heard that we have now 275 people on the waiting list to serve jail time. Well, we don't feel that we should build a massive facility to lock them up. They can work. they're the ones that can work outside the facility because they're minor offenders. They're at home now anyway. So they can come out here, we'll give them a lawnmower, they can push that around and maintain that facility. We're not going to spend money on that. So when we showed this to the business community, they were quite pleased that we weren't building something that would detract from their business, rather something that would help attract business. The last thing I want to talk about is traffic. There's been a lot of comments that building a facility this size is going to be a lot of traffic. Well, inmates don't come and go in this facility. Who does? What's the visitors? Visitors are in the evenings, after rush hour, and on weekends when we don't have business traffic. So our engineers looked at that, and we are not a significant contributor to the traffic problem out there. The traffic problem exists there today. It's not something that we're going to be adding to. We're shifting all of our efforts to the evenings and weekends so we don't add to an existing problem that's out there. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jerry Winkler, our architect from Integris out of Spokane, Washington, and let him talk a little bit about the facility from an architectural point of view.
Thank you, Mike. Just quickly, a couple of quick observations as we were developing the design of the facility. First of all, we worked with an excellent committee with representatives from the county and from the state and from the community as well. So I think they did an excellent job serving the community. Once we had a site and wanted to develop the design strategy, I think one of the key elements for developing the site was to establish zones so that the more secure areas step away back from the public thoroughfare. So you can see out front we have the parking public access area with some screening along the main roadway, and then the next area is the one-story portion of the building where the support activities go on that Mike was referring to. And then the area that's the furthest away from the public thoroughfare is the housing, where our inmates spend 90% of their time. They spend very little time further forward in the facility. And the housing itself is 2 levels high. Say that is 2 cells, one stacked upon the other. The building, again, as Mike was going through the layout, is very straightforward as far as the circulation pattern is concerned, and that's the primary feature in the safe and secure operations. The staff has good opportunity to observe all areas where the inmates are. You'll see staff in fixed positions and floor staff maintaining and supervising the inmates. The housing areas themselves, as I said, was 2 levels high. That's 2 cells high. That gives us much greater efficiency as far as the actual building construction, and provides staff good sight lines throughout the whole area. And sight lines is very critical as far as, again, the safe and secure operations of the facility. There's a lot of other details. I'm sure if people have questions, we can come back to those later. But with that, I'll turn it back to Beast.
All right. Thank you very much. And that'll wrap it up for all our speakers. Now it's your turn out there. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to go to the phones as well as talk to folks in the audience here in the City Council chambers. You're listening to KLCY. Those of you want to call in, 728-0093 or 1-800-775-6432. Those of you listening, let me tell you who is in our audience, so you have an idea of who you might want to direct your questions to. We have Sheriff Doug Chase, Captain Albert from the City Police Department, Judge Odlin is here, Judge Larson is here, also City Attorney Jim Nugent is here, County Attorney Dusty Dayshaw remains with us, Bob Anderson from the state of Montana, as well as Sam Lamayich from the state of Montana in the corrections area. Paul DeWolf from Gordon, Pearl, and Drapes can also talk some more about site selection if you like. And, of course, Captain Mike O'Hara, who is our project manager, will be happy to answer your questions, along with Mr. Winkler, whom you just heard of, who is with Integris Architects. So, get your questions ready. We'll be right back here on KLCY after this short break. City Hall, I'm Dean McPhee, your host. Tonight we're doing our public hearing for the proposed adult and juvenile detention facility. And now we open it up for public comment. And I'd like to go to one of our callers on the phone right now and let you start. Kim, are you on the air? And who would you like to talk to?
Yes, I am. Good evening. My name is Kim Bagnell, and I live out in Orchard Homes. I want to first of all thank the radio station for giving us the opportunity to call in, being we can't be there. I am kind of spooked at this point in my life. I think it's inevitable that we're going to get this jail whether we want it or not. I know Missoula is a growing metropolis, but the fact is that I pray that there is some listeners out there who have the final say on what a criminal's punishment is. Because a jail is not a place of solace. It should be the next step to the gas chamber. Don't make it comfortable. Make it something they'll never forget. And if you're going to concentrate on the young people that need our guidance. Thank you very much.
Kim, thank you very much for your call. And who would like to address that? Judge Larson, would you like to address Kim's comments there?
Well, particularly on the juvenile aspect, I mean, that's what I see as...
Stand up and chew.
You don't need, Judge, you don't need to pick that. It's okay. Now, we're just getting our mechanics straight here, but all of the judges in the county are very committed to having a juvenile component to this detention center, because if we don't start working with our kids, time and time again, the most serious adult offenders have very lengthy juvenile records and have not been held accountable for their actions as juveniles. And that's what we'd like to change here in this community, and have a detention facility available to us so that we can hold youth accountable for their actions, and also augment any treatment programs we have with the juvenile detention facility there. If the youth don't want to do the treatment, one sanction is detention. It's a very effective sanction. Thank you, Judge. Sam Lomayich, you'd like to make a comment as well.
I've looked at the plans, and for those that are interested, there is a mock cell out here by the Missoula Fire Department across the street from the courthouse. The structure is as Spartan as it can be and still meet minimum federal and requirements regarding detention. By no means do I think that this is going to be any type of a country club setting. So maybe Mike can address that as well.
Captain Michael Hare from the Sheriff's Department, you wanted to comment on Kim's thoughts too.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Sam was saying, that we do have this cell out there at the fire station. Additionally, we'll have the cell out at Southgate Mall on the 19th, Saturday, all day long. We'll be taking it up to Sealy Lake at the high school on the 21st at 7 p.m. And then on the 22nd, we'll be down Lolo at the community center with the cell. So take a look at it, and I think you'll be pleased that we've made this Spartan and a bare bones facility.
Okay, we have a question from a member of our audience here. Michael, why don't you step up to the podium and tell us your questions, comments, thoughts?
Yeah,
Those of you at home, by the way, 728-0093 is our phone number, or 1-800-775-6432. And get your calls and questions in. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Michael Goncher from Milltown, and right now I feel a little bit like Custer. My biggest concern here is with regard to the numbers I've been hearing. I think the only thing that could be worse than the situation we've got right now is to have the same situation and be several $1 million in debt besides. As I gather, we're talking about a facility that we're being asked to spend $17 million for, and I guess the state is putting in some more, and the federal government as well, which will provide about 336 additional adult detention capacity, if my numbers are right, and then a couple dozen juveniles, if I understand correctly. I also understand from our conversation on your radio program the other day that we're going to lose all of the current cells or detention capacity that we have in the courthouse over here. And the number was estimated at about 80. So we're only going to be adding a net increase of about 280 total, juvenile and adult, if my numbers are right. But beyond this is a regional facility, so it's going to be receiving prisoners from outside Missoula County as well. Am I correct? And so the net is even less than 280. Now I contrast that with the numbers that I heard from County Attorney Deshaw tonight, which I frankly, I don't know if this means that there are 9,300 individuals that arrest warrants are not being served, or if Beeman is responsible for a handful of those 7. But regardless, it is a frightening number. My calculations show that we're adding at the rate of 700 per month. So the numbers just don't square. I was trying to think today of a good analogy. If the only alternative I knew of for transportation was one of these, the Porsches that look like the old AMC Pacers but cost $100,000, I wouldn't have any basis for comparison, But if I then learned there were other alternatives like Chevys and Fords and Cadillacs that were only half as much but carried more people, I'd think, gee, that Porsche isn't a very wise investment. And then further, if I knew there were used cars even less expensive, then all of that Porsche really would look like an absurd and wasteful expenditure. And that's what I'm concerned about here. This looks to me like the Porsche, which will only carry me and my toothbrush. And looks like the problem is far bigger than that. So I'm going to have to vote against this, not because I disagree with the need. I agree. I believe the numbers. The numbers convince me beyond any doubt that we need something. But it needs to be an order of magnitude bigger than this. Now, if I didn't think there were any alternatives, I wouldn't know where to turn. But I keep thinking about that situation down there in Arizona, where they're incarcerating prisoners in tents. And not that I'm proposing we'd use tents up here in our climate, but something comparable to that. I can't believe that we can't address this problem at much, much lower cost. Now, I've heard, and I get conflicting messages. I've heard the other day we talked about there are federal regulations that are going to prevent us from doing certain things. But then Sheriff Chase says, no, there aren't federal regulations. And then I heard Commissioner Evans say, yes, there are federal regulations. And then we heard reference tonight to the Lake County order that they're going to have to spend $700,000. However, and I know I'm probably sticking my neck out in trusting the Missoulian to have their facts straight, but in this story on from the October 2nd edition, what it says is that the ACLU brought charges or did something, but then MACO, upon the advice of MACO, the county just caved in. So as far as I know, there was no attempt to defend against the ACLU's charges. We just caved in, which is a neat way to get around I-105 now, I guess. I have to ask, as Judge Oglen says, that people are coming before him saying, I ain't going to pay and I ain't going to do my public service because I don't have to. I wonder why we can't take the same attitude towards the ACLU and the federal government. And they can say, hey, you're going to have to do this, and we say, no, what are you going to do, put us all in jail? So my point is, I suspect the real hammer over our head are these federal funds. That if we were to say, no, we're not going to do what you folks want, then what we would do is be giving up some federal money. And from my standpoint, it's about time for us to start thinking about doing without this federal money, because I'm afraid we're just not very far from the point where the federal government isn't going to have any money to give to us anyway. So I don't think we ought to let that concern ourselves. If the ACLU wants to scream and holler, let them do it. What are they going to do? So just in summary, it just seems to me that we're being asked to spend way too much money, and we're getting too little for it. Bottom line. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. You're listening to the public hearing on the proposed adult juvenile detention facility here on KLCY. What do you think of Michael's comments? Our phone number is 728-0093 or 1-800-775-6432. And you're more than welcome to make any questions, comments, any of that. Captain O'Hara, Michael pretty much addressed all our guests here. We'll let you start and address some of his concerns.
Thank you, and thank you, Mike. I identified about 7 questions, so if I miss one or don't direct them to the right person, please let me know. We'll get back to it. Regarding losing the current cells, if we kept the current cells, then I need additional money to staff and operate that facility. I mentioned earlier I get $1.3 million. We don't have $1.3 million to add to that facility. We just don't have it. As Paul Wolf talked about, we're in a space crunch. We started the facility with the sheriff's office. When we found out the costs were so darn high, Doug Chase said, forget it. I'm not going to add my space out there. Cut it. We need to save some money. So that's why on the cells. On the regional aspect of the facility, 144 beds are for the state prison. The other 192 is for the city, county, high patrol, and the U.S. Marshals. If we or overbuild and we have empty beds, we would offer them to Lake County because, as you know, they lost 20 beds. So we generate some revenue to lower our costs. As far as bringing people outside the state of Montana, we're not doing that. As far as an analogy to the vehicle, I think we got one of those Plymouth minivans here. I think we got the best of both worlds. We got enough space. We have the ability to add that 3rd seat and add 3 more kids when the family grows. We've got that in our design. As far as tents, we looked at that. And that's Sheriff Joe Arpaio down in Maricopa County. A lot of people don't know that I was sent down there in 1985 by the National Institute of Corrections to train their staff. I've seen their facilities. And what they're doing is locking up minor offenders. I don't believe that you and I should pay to lock up minor offenders in a tent or anywhere else. They're fine at home now, and they can go out and clean the barns at the fair, as far as I'm concerned. As far as the issue of the ACLU, I guess I would like to address that to Dusty to talk about 1983 actions and the resulting 1988 actions, where if you don't settle soon, lawyers, as we know, make the big bucks.
Yeah, I'd like to address actually several of those issues, but let's start with the ACLU. The fact is that if we're sued and we lose, and I think we're rapidly approaching the time we will lose. In fact, we've already lost one lawsuit where we had to pay $18,000 to an inmate for personal injuries this last summer. We got a whole batch more in the works, and we're going to start losing more and more of them as they go along. When we get judgments against us, we are required, just like anybody else that has a judgment against them, to pay for them. And unfortunately, we can't really declare bankruptcy. We have to do judgment levies against the taxpayers to pay those judgments. Now, it is true that in Lake County, they entered into a settlement in that lawsuit. But that was on the advice not only of Mako, but of several other attorneys. It seemed that it was better to settle that thing at the level they did than go to the mat and stand the risk of losing dramatically more, plus paying a whole bunch more of attorney's fees, which is just money down a rat hole. We're facing that prospect here. We simply cannot ignore our legal obligations if we're sued. As far as the federal thing goes, yeah, we could snub our nose at the feds, but they do carry a big stick. They can withdraw a lot of federal funds, and believe me, we get a lot of federal funds. I couldn't tell you the exact number, but it's probably way more than the $17 million that we're talking about for this facility in the great scheme of things. Not only can they withdraw funds, but they can also throw public officials in jail for contempt. Certain public officials, and it's happened, believe me. There's been sheriffs, there's been county attorneys, there's been county commissioners, and other public officials that have gone to federal penitentiaries for contempt of federal court. I've been threatened with it myself on a couple of occasions, and you know, I'm willing to go a long way in battling the federal government. I'm a strong believer in state rights, but I tell you, you know, I don't know if I'm willing to go to the extent of being a martyr to go to jail to stand up for states' rights to that extent. I'd like to address a little bit the question of the number of offenders. Frankly, about 80% of that 9,300 warrants that we've got out are for minor offenders. I'm talking about people who have got barking dogs, who have got community decay violations, who have minor traffic offenses, who have sign violations, who have all kinds of regulatory violations. They simply don't go to court. And the reason they don't go to court is they know that if they don't go, there's not a damn thing we can do about it right now. Some of these people are multiple offenders. I think that when we get the state, that is the jail, to back us up, we can start working on that backlog, and a lot of those people will eventually realize that the jig's up and they're going to have to come in and start dealing with these things. I believe that we're probably going to have to cut some deals. We may have to reduce some of these charges. We may have to do various things to work on that backlog. But once we have the ability to actually do something about it, I think we can make a dent in it and over time work it down to manageable numbers. But right now it's totally out of control and the public knows it. I mean, by this forum tonight, we're telling people who are inclined not to obey the law and who are inclined not to go to court that they might as well. I mean, we're in a sense kind of creating this problem, but it's totally out of control, and the only solution I see is this new facility. The last thing I want to address is alternatives. We have not ignored alternatives. We have a county work program, several county work programs. We've got, I think, over 1,000 people doing community service programs and other things, but those are those people that Judge Odlin talks about that are sentenced to that at least appear in court and attempt to do some of those things. Many of them don't, and there's a limit to what we can do with alternatives without the jail facility to back us up. We have looked at a couple things that, like the renovation of the old fire station, looking at the cell blocks out at the fort. We've looked at tents. We've looked at other things. I don't think that some of those things are still out of the question, because even if we get this bond issue, we're going to have to deal with the problem for the next 2 or 3 years. But ultimately, we've got to have this to back us up.
Thank you, County Attorney Dusty Desha. Sheriff Chase, I know you had some comments to make. By the way, those of you at home listening to KLCY, jump right in there. The water's fine. 728-0093 is our phone number, or 1-800-775-6432. Sheriff Chase?
County Attorney Dusty Desha answered a number of the things I was going to address. I do want to address to Michael, though, that somewhere along the number of conversations we have, there is a misunderstanding that I made a statement there aren't federal regulations or guidelines for us to follow. There definitely are, and in fact we're in court on those right now, and as the county attorney has alluded, we're in trouble with one, and it has to do with exercise. And I think we ask the people to keep in mind that these guidelines come from the federal courts and from correctional standards, and we're going to be held accountable for them. And it's a pay me now or pay me later, and I don't say that as a threat, and I don't say that to try and intimidate or scare tactics. We saw it in Lake County. According to Lake County leader, each resident will pay on the average of $120 in extra taxes this year, unprotested, in order to build this exercise facility and make the other adjustments. We see it coming. It is our, we believe, obligation, morally and ethically, to point out to the community the problems we're up against, where we're going into the future, and without a new facility, we don't have many options or many answers. And the other thing that falls under this is Missoula County does not have monies to institute many new programs. The programs we've currently got in place all cost money one way or another to operate or to monitor the individuals doing the community service work. Our backs are against the wall, and they've been against the wall. And since 1988, when I joined that sheriff's department, I've noticed city police, highway patrol, and sheriff's deputies out on the street, and it's only getting worse, the treatment they're receiving from those they're dealing with, especially those with violations and warrants. The detention officers are under tremendous stress, and it's not a safe operation up there with the crowded conditions and the type of prisoners we're holding. And that's one other thing to mention. We are not asking to build this new facility to be housing a whole bunch of misdemeanors or minor crimes. It is to take care of the violent crimes that we are unable to deal with today on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Sheriff Chase. We've got another caller on the line, and then Captain O'Hara, I guess you had some comments too. Joe's on the line. Joe, you're listening to our public hearing. What's your comments or questions?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Hello? I think I've been turned off.
No, you're on, Joe. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yes.
I would like to address myself to the juvenile branch of the jail. And I think you're thinking in terms of housing juveniles over a period of years even, you know. And that's what I'm wondering, if this is going to be like Pine Hills. And if so, I'm wondering what is going to be done about furnishing education for these children. And I'm speaking of young children. And I wonder if you could address that, if it was going to be a tutor situation, or if you're going to have access to classrooms in that facility, or a classroom with different grade levels, or have you given it a thought? I know they have a school at Pine Hill.
Okay, Joe, thank you very much for your call, and Judge Larson will address your question. Judge?
Yes, Joe. First of all, these are pre-trial detention for juveniles. It's not going to be Pine Hills. It's while they're awaiting trial, or for violations of probation, or for those who have left Pine Hills and violate their parole, a place for them to be temporarily. The average stay now, I think, is in the neighborhood of 10 days. Yes, they should get education. There are state requirements that require education, but currently the juveniles from Missoula County who are transported and held in Kalispell do not get education. If we don't have to spend the money on transportation, we can get an education program going here in cooperation with our school districts.
Thank you, Judge Larson. We're going to take a quick break here. I want to thank some folks who are helping me. Peter Christian has been helping me with microphone cord and everything today. I want to thank him. Also, Sleeper back in the control room at KLCY is also helping, and I want to thank both these gentlemen who are donating their time to tonight to bring you this broadcast, so thank you both. If you have questions or comments, 728-0093 or 1-800-775-6432. KLCY will continue its coverage of this public hearing on the proposed adult and juvenile detention center right after this. City Council chambers, as we continue our discussion about the proposed adult juvenile detention facility. Those of you listening, you can call 728-0093. Those of you here, raise your hand. Be happy to get your question or comment in. Want to remind folks, the way we're going to decide if this is built or not is for you to vote. So I must stress, please do vote, and ask your questions now so you make an informed vote. Eleanor is on the line. Eleanor, welcome to our public hearing, and how can we help you?
Well, you cut me off.
No, you're there, Eleanor.
Hey, you cut me off.
No, you're there. Go ahead.
Somebody cut me off?
You got to push the audition button there, Sleeper. Hi, Eleanor.
No harm. It's not coming on the telephone.
Go ahead. You're on the air, Eleanor. Go ahead.
Well, I don't hear nothing on the telephone, Brucey.
We'll take Eleanor's call in a minute.
This is live radio, ladies and gentlemen.
That's how it works.
Here.
Are you there, Eleanor? Okay. Eleanor went away. Thank you for your call, Eleanor, and sorry we couldn't take you. She couldn't hear us there for some reason. You're listening to our public hearing. Is there any other questions, comments, things? I know Captain O'Hara, did you want to address a few things that were said earlier? We had some calls come in, had to take a break. Go ahead.
I just want to address the issue of why don't we build it bigger and have more beds? Well, legally, we can only go into debt, I'm told, $18.8 million. Well, 17.1 gets us the core facility. I would like to have more beds, but the taxpayers have said we're fed up with taxes, we want to keep the costs down. So we've come up with this core facility, like I made the analogy with the Plymouth minivan. We can add that third seat down the road when we need it, and if the voters approve it. So, and I've explained this several times, that the 17.1 on a $100,000 house is $36.59 a year, and that includes your interest. That's $3 a month. That's 10 cents a day. And we kept it at that rate because the taxpayers have said enough is enough. So that's why we're at the numbers we're at. Yes, I'd like to have more beds, but at some point we have to reach compromise with those who have to pay the bills. So down the road, if our predictions are wrong, we have the space to add beds. We don't have to build a second or a third jail. We can add housing units. So that's why we set out this core amount as a beginning.
Thank you, Captain Michael O'Hara. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, anything like that? Michael, go ahead. We'll get you a microphone up here for you so the folks in the auditorium can hear you too.
Yeah, Michael Goncher again. I just want to respond to a couple of things that Mike O'Hara said. You'll recall I said that we would be building a facility with a total of 360 beds here, but we're going to lose 80 when they convert the current jail facility over to other uses, so that leaves a net increase of 280. In his response, Officer O'Hara indicated that 144 of those are going to be designated for state prisoners. So the 280 less 144 means that we're basically ending up with an additional 136, a capacity for 136 detainees over what we currently have now, for which we'll be paying $17 million. Again, I say we're paying way too much and getting too little. And regarding the situation in Arizona, I called the sheriff of Maricopa County yesterday, and I learned that indeed those folks that are kept in the tents are with sentences up to 1 year. So I don't know if that's minor or not. If they're over a year, then they have to go to state prison. But up to a year, they're housing them in that tent facility. Thanks.
Okay, Michael. Captain O'Hara, would you like to address that? Also remind you, listening to KLCY, we can still have time to squeeze a few more calls in at 728-0093. Captain O'Hara.
Yeah, in facility county jails, up to a year is for misdemeanors. Those are the minor offenders. A year or longer is felons going to prison. So again, I don't think it's appropriate to hire that staff, to put out those tents, and spend taxpayers' money that way. Those folks can work for us. They can go to the fairgrounds, clean out the barns for Sam. They can go to the road department. Like many of callers have called in on KLCY and said, we have a napweed problem. I said, great, let's put these guys to work. Let's not spend money on them. They don't deserve it.
Okay, thank you, Captain O'Hara. Let's go back to the phones. Our phone number is 728-0093 or 1-800-775-6432. Eleanor, let's try you again. Are you there?
Yeah, I hear you this time.
Okay, great. What's your question, Eleanor?
I hear about this federal, the exercise. I'm for it. I'll go for it if they have the exercise. And then you can hire the Job Corps to build the damn building. I mean, we don't have to build the tents. We can get the Job Corps and have those young guys that are learning how to be carpenters. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Eleanor.
Oh, that's what I want. I can't even hear you. I mean, I don't even know if I'm on the air or not. But that's what we can do. I'll go for it. Well, I'll go for it if you have a decent place, too, because I don't want them come out as mean. Because I met some young boys, young men who came out who wasn't treated very good. And they came out mean, and their mean is all, they mean all get out. They happened to treat me damn decent because I understood them. That's what I'm scared of.
Okay, thank you for your call, Eleanor. Does anyone want to address that? I think she just had some general comments. And any other from our staff? We can probably squeeze one more call in here, 728-0093, listening on KLCY. Also, those of you listening that may have wanted to see a better view of the plans. I know it's hard to show you things on the radio. You can watch this broadcast on MCAT. on TCI Cable Channel 7, Fibervision Channel 13, October 27th at 2 p.m. So those of you listening at home that do want to now be able to watch it and see the plans and see what some of our guests were describing, you can do so on MCAT. We want to thank MCAT very much for covering these proceedings as well. Sheriff Chase, any closing comments?
The one thing I'd like to again remind people that the old fire station located right across from the courthouse is a prototype jail cell. It's your opportunity to come down, take a look at it. It's open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays and 11 a.m. till 4 p.m. on weekends and holidays. We encourage you to come down, take a look, so you know exactly what we intend to build.
And with that, I encourage all of you to get out and vote. No matter how you stand on this issue, get out and vote. You may have questions that you didn't have a chance to get into tonight. By all means, you can stop by KLCY Radio. We have some forms you can fill out. We'll make sure that the sheriff or Captain O'Hara or whomever else you'd like a question answered gets that, and I'm sure they'll respond back to you as quick as they can. Also, Captain O'Hara, if they have questions and would like to get a hold of you, how do they do so?
They can give me a call at the sheriff's office at 523-4717, extension 3337. That's my voicemail, and I will respond to their calls.
Okay. All right, well, that brings us to a close. I hope you can all get out and vote. Remember, on the ballot, it says Missoula County bond election. That is what you'll be voting on for the proposed adult and juvenile detention facility. Thank you all for listening at home, and those of you that came by here tonight. Hope everyone has a great evening. We'll talk to you, and I'll see you on the radio bright and early tomorrow morning. You're listening to KLCY East Missoula. It's 9 o'clock.
From City Council chambers in